So welcome everybody, this is the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform weekly community call happening every single Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, and whatever time that is within your time zone. My name is Ayça Juvonen. I'm a Principal Product Manager in Microsoft 365 community areas, and I'll be your host today. Now, we'll have the typical setup of slides or setup within this course. We'll start with a recapping all of the different assets and news and everything else what's available for you to get started on the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. And then we'll do the group picture mode in together mode, which seems to be working. This is already a good start. I can see the people in the group mode already at this moment, so that's a positive thing. And then we go to the actual starts of today. So roughly 12:15 or 12 past or so. Marc Windle is going to start with getting started with SharePoint Embedded. That's a part of the SharePoint Embedded series, which we started last week. Then Gary Preedy is kind of talking about the introduction to Microsoft Copilot Studio, roughly on a half past. And then Ayça Bas is the last, but definitely not the least. And she's going to talk about extend Copilot for Microsoft 365, ingesting GitHub repositories and issues using Python. So really cool scenario for as well for extending that Copilot extensibility. So two demos on the Copilot and Copilot extensibility, and then SharePoint Embedded from Marc to get started. Let's actually go through some of the assets. Now, some of these slides you've seen in the past. If you've been in this course, that's intentional. We always have new people within the course, and we want to recap what's available for them to get started. And also, you might be wondering on, hey, what was again the location where all the recordings are going? Well, they go to our Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community YouTube video channel, where we have more than 46,000 subscribers and 2 million views in a year, and a lot of videos getting published there every single week. I think last week we published 14 videos within that site across the different areas within Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. We have our LinkedIn group for sharing your findings and having discussions with other people in the community. We have a lot of open source assets across multiple locations in the GitHub, but as it might be a bit difficult to find the relevant sample for you, we have then the sample galleries for making it super easy to find the relevant sample to get started, to learn from other people who built on top of the Microsoft 365 or Power Platform. And there's quite a few URLs to remember. All of those can be located at the AKMS community home, which is going to have a redesign pretty soon. So that's looking pretty cool quite soon as well. Now, we do have quite a lot of these community calls. Some of them are with Microsoft presenters, like this Tuesday one typically is with Microsoft presenters. There's going to be a few exceptions on that one in the future, but exceptions make the rule, or whatever the saying is. On top of that, we have the Power Platform monthly community calls, Office Admin monthly community call, and then our 7 a.m. Pacific Thursday series, which is either the Microsoft 365 Power Platform community call or Viva Connection SharePoint Framework community call. In that series, we'll typically have community demos, and there's a great opportunity for you to demo over there as well. If you're interested on showcasing something what you figure out within out-of-the-box features, or something what you figured out on how you can configure, extend some of the features, so you build something cool, you are welcome to present. We're gonna cover that one in a second. You can download a recurrent invites as community calls URL, and all of those call details are always available at the meetup, where we have 1,600 people already signed up. It's a really cool location where you'll get an email whenever the agendas are being shared. Now, I mentioned that there's an opportunity for you to present, and that is available for some of these calls. For actually quite a few of those calls, we do welcome community presenters, and that's the easiest way to learn from each other. It's a great opportunity if you're wondering on, I would like to be an MVP, or I would like to practice my presentation skills before I go in person. Great opportunities of doing that. You would only go to that form URL, you'll fill in the form, and we will get you scheduled in the right community call. So don't worry about, you don't need to know which call is suitable for you. Share your topic, share the idea what you want to present, and we'll get you scheduled based on that submission. So really cool option for everybody in the community, because we want to learn what you are using our products for. Now, related on using products and how can you get started on Microsoft 365 Power Platform, we give you a free Microsoft 365 developer tenants. There has been some changes related on that rules and all of that. Recently, there was a news article in the blog, in the developer blog on last week, and please use that article for the latest information around that program. But by default, you will get a free E5 developer tenant, which will renew automatically every single 90 days, or think they're changing that a bit. We also have a lot of learning material available in Microsoft Learn, which will get you started on Microsoft 365 and Power Platform, or both of them, because that's the right combination. We also have our Microsoft 365 Power Platform shows available. So we have the PMP Weekly with yours truly and Waldeck Mastercards, where we typically have an MVPs or Microsoft employees talking about their career and the impact of the community. There's also the Caruana and Heather Mondays at Microsoft happening bi-weekly. And then there's the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast, a lot of interviews with developers and more focused on extensibility. On samples, we already covered this one a bit, but we do have our AKMS community samples URL where you can find all of the samples which have been shared by Microsoft or by the community. So from one centralized location, you'll find all of the samples across Microsoft 365 Power Platform, and you can use the search, you can filter down what the samples are doing, you can figure out or only the samples which have been created by a specific person and so on. There's actually 1,850 plus samples already in there, so the numbers are growing quite fast, which is really cool. Now, let's go to the following slide. I think Hugo is on the call to talk about a bit about what is actually the Sharing is Caring initiative and how does this help on getting started. Actually, just double checking. Yes, you are. There you are.
Oh, I should have said I'm not.
Yes.
All right, folks. So we keep on talking about how easy it is for everyone to contribute and how everyone is welcome. But we do understand that it can be quite scary, right? You might think it's not my place to contribute. What if I mess up GitHub or scary things like that? Sharing is Caring is there to help you get started. We really focused on all the fears that we have as contributors, or we had as first-time contributors, and we created sessions around them. They're hands-on sessions, they're never recorded, they're safe spaces, and we'll do things like we'll show you how to do your first GitHub contribution. We'll show you how to create Power Platform samples, how to write blogs for the PMP blog or your own blog, or to get started with all sorts of samples, including doing your first time presentation in a community call or in a conference. So you can join us by going to aka.ms/sharingiscaring and sign up for any of the sessions. And we have office hours coming soon where you'll be able to ask us your questions one-on-one. And if we go to the next slide, we also have the community recognition program. So if Sharing is Caring is about enabling you to contribute to the community community recognition program is to recognize the hard work you do. So if you have done samples, you've contributed to blogs, PMP blogs and things like that, we will issue you a badge that recognizes your hard work. And all you need to do to get the badge is to go to aka.ms/community/recognition, register your GitHub address with your email address, and when you do a contribution that is considered, we will send you a badge automatically. And we look forward to seeing what you have to contribute to the community, and we love all the work you do. Back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Hugo. And Canada and Helsinki taking over. I think the weather is pretty similar. Is it snowy over Canada? Just out of curiosity. I think it is.
Yeah,
still.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still suffering from this. Some people are saying spring is coming. I don't understand what it means. At some moment of a time, in 3 months or 4 months, we'll have summer for 2 days. Anyway, so moving into the things. First of all, quick recap on events. We have the Microsoft 365 conference coming up on April 13th, May 1st and 2nd. That's in Orlando, sunny Orlando, in the Walt Disney World. Great opportunity for catching up on the latest on Microsoft 365 Power Platform topics. A lot of the latest AI features, a lot of features are going to be announced actually there, and we have a great set of Microsoft presenters which we will be sharing within the conference website pretty soon. On top of this, we have the European Collaboration Summit coming in 14th to 16th of May. That's happening in Wiesbaden, which is right next to Frankfurt, which is one of the hubs within the Europe. So super convenient location to also fly into if you are in another location, not in Germany or not in southern Germany, or is it mid Germany? I don't know. But great location for catching up with the community and looking into 3,000 attendees or so within here as well. So a lot of other people will be joining. Now, there's also the TechCon 365, which used to be called EduCon 365, but it's now renamed as TechCon. That's happening in Seattle, DC, and Dallas on that side of the pond, starting from June 3rd to 7th, 2024, and then followed by August and November in DC and Dallas. Great opportunities as well. And then in the September, we also have the Las Vegas Power Platform Conference coming up on 18 to 2024. Awesome stuff and workshops over there as well. So don't miss out on all of these great conference opportunities. We're not obviously expecting you to be in every single one of them, but great opportunities to join and meet up with the community. Now, on top of that, there's a lot of community-powered events, which you can all find out from communitydays.org, which is the location where all of the community events are being listed. Right now, you just missed the M365 Community Days at Sea at 2024. So the Royal Caribbean Oasis of Seas left, I think, yesterday from Miami, and it's now cruising around the Caribbean. That's a pretty cool way of doing community days and conferences, for sure. Other options are available all around the world. So check out them. Most of these are free. Some of them might have a small cost. Some of them might be remote. So you don't have to be in person to join them. Now, quick recap on the news of this week. A lot of news from Microsoft this week. So some of the weeks we don't actually release anything, and then some weeks there's a lot of news like this one. So I'm going to paste in the list of all of the news in the chat. That's going to be a big post. But if you're interested in checking out what's happening, that's a great list of happenings across the Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, Power Platform, Power Apps, and developer topics, and so on. So a lot of news announcements and opportunities to stay up to date on the Microsoft side. Now, before we then go to the actual stars of today with Marc and Gary and Ayça, let's do a quick crew photo. We can see that the crew photo together mode is actually working. So if you're willing, enable the camera and you will be in the screen. And we'll grab a GIF animation out of this as well. So let me actually go in here. I'm not going to change anything because we're not pixelated. So this is really, really cool. A lot of familiar faces again there. We have 50 seats in the room, so let's wait for a while before we start recording, because typically we will fill in that 50 seats. I'm hearing rumors and no promises, but apparently we are increasing the capacity in together mode, so it would be really cool to have like 200 people in this, right, Fabian, on the back row?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not going to make news. On a public call.
No commitments, but
No commitments.
There's work being done potentially on increasing this.
Yeah.
And now I think we are starting to hit the limit of 50, and it's not super pixelated.
Except for Cody's pixels.
Thank you, Cody, on that one. That's really cool. Now, let me put the recording on, and let's do some hand waving, everybody. 3, 2, 1. We'll grab a GIF animation. This Hugo on the back row, Fabian on the back row, showing how this can be done, waving for everybody else in the community. Awesome. Great to have you in a community call and all of those happy faces. It's always one of my favorite things in this calls. Excellent. We'll grab a GIF animation out of that and share it in LinkedIn and in Twitter. Now, then we'll actually go to the real stars of today. And as said, we'll start with Marc, go to Gary, and then Ayça, because I know Marc has a hard stop on 5:30. But Marc, I guess you're good to go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Are you able to hear me and see my screen?
All good. We can hear you and we can see you. Take it away.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm Marc Windle. So I'm a product manager at Microsoft. I'm working on SharePoint Embedded, specifically some of the developer experiences stuff around SharePoint Embedded. We're doing a mini series on SharePoint Embedded. Last week, Reid Carlsberg covered an introduction to the product, and it is in public preview at the moment. So there's lots of documentation and code samples and things like that available online if you check it out. And I can also paste some of the links to that stuff in the chat when I'm done. Today, we're going to cover getting started with SharePoint Embedded. So I'm going to give you an overview of the anatomy of a SharePoint Embedded application, so you understand kind of what makes up a SharePoint Embedded app and a little bit of the structure of things there. And then I'm going to show you how to enable it. So something that you need to do currently while we're in public preview is to actually go to the SharePoint Admin Center and enable the product. And then we'll do a quick setup. All of that anatomy and setup stuff, we'll do that quickly with the VS Code extension, and then I'll show you how you can run the sample apps through there and use the Postman collection. Okay, so this is a slide that we looked at last week, and I just want to do a little bit of review there. Ultimately, SharePoint Embedded is a headless, developer-focused content partition with an M365 tenant that allows you to bring the power of the Microsoft 365 storage platform to your custom applications. The fundamental unit within SharePoint Embedded is a file storage container. And this is a new entity that we've created, or basically a new storage partition within an M365 tenant that lets you create and manage content within that tenancy. I'm going to zoom into that a little bit, and so talk a little bit about containers. And so kind of covering the anatomy of an app from bottoms up. A container is really a headless SharePoint partition for your application. The best way to think about it is each container is kind of like a document library, like a SharePoint document library. Now, it's not exactly a SharePoint document library. It's headless, and there are a couple differences, but that's a good metaphor when you're thinking about it. And so a container is really a place where you can put files and documents and things like that, and you can have many containers within a tenant. When you do create a container within a tenant, your app is the one that creates it, and it has full control over the containers that it manages. So those containers, the experiences of accessing content within those containers are controlled by your app. They're not accessible within OneDrive and SharePoint and things like that. Your app gets to control the experiences of accessing content and managing content within those containers. Now, every container, like I said, lives within a tenant, and every container belongs to a container type. And so this is a new concept with SharePoint Embedded. It's not really too complicated. Like, a container type belongs to an Entra app. And so the way to think about it is, in order to have and create containers within a tenant, you first must create an app and a container type for it. And I'll go over those steps in a second. But really, it's just a way of saying that these containers belong to your app. And that's it. And you can see the relationship between those two things. So a container type has many containers, and a container belongs to one and only one container type. Going a little bit deeper now into app structure and setup. So like when you want to get started with SharePoint Embedded, this is how you go about doing it. First of all, you need to create and configure an Azure Entra or AAD app registration. Nothing too specific about that in terms of SharePoint Embedded. All of the APIs that you're going to access to manage SharePoint Embedded content are through Graph. And so this is pretty standard stuff. If you want to be able to call Graph, you need an Azure app. And so you need to do that first off. And then with an app, you can create a container type. And so effectively, that container type defines container ownership, and your Azure Entra app owns that particular container type. And hopefully this stuff will make a little bit more sense in a second. Now, once you have those two things, then for every tenant that you want to create containers in, so if I'm making a line of business application, it would be the same tenant. But if I'm making a multi-tenant application, I would have to do this for every tenant. I'll need to get admin consent for the SharePoint container.selected role, and that is a new role and scope that is created for being able to manage SharePoint embedded content and containers and things like that. Once you have that admin consent, then you have the ability to register that container type on that tenant. It's effectively installing your SharePoint embedded application on that tenant. And now you have the ability to go create and manage containers and contents within those containers in that particular tenant. Okay, so that's the anatomy. I'm going to get into some of the demos here. I'm going to show you how you enable SharePoint Embedded. This is something that you're only going to need to do during public preview. Once we go into general availability, you won't need to do that. It's just something that we need to do now. And then we'll do a quick setup with the VS Code extension and show you how to run the sample apps and use the Postman collection. So I'll break out of PowerPoint now, and we'll go open up a browser window. So I'm logged into one of my developer tenants. I'm in the I'm actually in the Microsoft Admin Center. I'm going to go into the SharePoint Admin Center. And once that loads, I'm going to go into settings, and I'll show you how you can enable SharePoint Embedded. Before you can create a SharePoint Embedded application, and before you can install a SharePoint Embedded application on your tenant, you have to do this step. So you can see there's a new setting here within the SharePoint Admin Center called SharePoint Embedded. You can click that checkbox, press enable, and that's it. Now SharePoint Embedded is enabled on this tenant, so I can both create and install applications on this tenancy. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to go and show you the quick setup with the Visual Studio Code extension. And so this is a new extension. It's also in preview. The way to find it is open up Visual Studio Code, go to the extensions section, and then you can just search for SharePoint Embedded. should be the first result that comes up. You can see there, we've got the new extension. It's in preview mode. What this really does is it automates some of those getting started steps that I was talking to you about. So extensions installed, and that created this new SharePoint Embedded option within the action pane on the left-hand side. Once you go into the extension, the first and only thing you can do is to sign in. You need to sign in with an administrator account. If you don't have access to an administrator user account on your tenant, or if you just don't have a tenant at all, you can obviously get your own tenant with the Microsoft 365 developer program. I think Vesa mentioned that as well already. So I'm going to sign in. Let me just confirm which tenant I'm using here. Apologies. I am using the 435 tenant. Okay, so I'm going to sign into the 435 tenant. All right, that's it. That'll bounce me back to the extension, so I'm signed in. And the only thing that I'm able to do now is to create a free trial container type. So I'll do that. And this is, again, like I said, automating those steps. So the first thing I want to do is create an Azure Entra application registration. I'm just going to go with the default here. It will create one for me and configure it. And then I'm going to name my container type. I'm just going to go with the default name. So while that's doing all of its good work in the background, so it's going to create an app, and it's going to create a container type where that app owns it, and it's going to register that container type on the same tenant. Right now in the Visual Studio Code extension, it only supports free trial container types. Now, I didn't cover it before, but there are actually two types of container types. One is free trial. That's to be able to get you started, playing with the APIs and building a proof of concept application quick and easy. You don't need a credit card. You don't need an Azure subscription. You can just do that. It lasts for 30 days. The content in there will expire. It'll get it recycled. But you can also create paid container types. I'll cover that in a future session. In order to create those paid container types, you have to use the SharePoint PowerShell module, and you can create it that way and set it up with an Azure subscription. Now, it's prompting me for consent on this application. Like I said, in order to register the container type, you have to get consent on that app. So I'm just going to run through those steps and accept that. And now it's going to do it one more time to get a access token. And there we go. So it should be creating a free trial container type for me, and it registered on the container type. Looks like the registration didn't succeed. I'm going to try that again. All right. So that container type and app are created. It's registered on my tenant. And now I'm actually able to go and manage and create containers and manage the content within them. So now I'm going to show you with the extension, you can actually load some of our samples directly from GitHub. So I'll show you the steps to do that. I just click load samples here. It's going to warn me that it's going to put some of the configuration settings, including the secret for this app in plain text on my machine. So there's two types of samples right now. We have a JavaScript, Node.js, and Azure Function-based one. And there's also another one written in ASP.NET. So what I'm going to do is I selected the JavaScript one. It's going to fork that or clone that repo directly from GitHub and put it onto my local machine, and now put it into my workspace. But it's not just going to grab the sample. What it's actually going to do is take the configuration files or the configuration settings from the app that just got created, and it's going to inject them into the config file on this local cloned copy of that sample app. And I should be able to, because there's a VS Code configuration for the sample, I can actually just click run right away. And what that's going to do is it's going to kind of set up and load this sample app with one click of a button. Now, it is going to take a minute or two because it has to run npm install on both the client and the service, and then it has to start both the client and the service applications. And so all those libraries are going to get pulled down. While that's happening, I'm going to show you how you can use the Visual Studio Code extension to kind of get started quickly with the Postman collection that we have. So I'm going to go back over to the SharePoint Embedded extension. And again, in here, another one of the options we have is to export Postman config. So I'm just going to do that. And I will throw one of these, throw the file here on my desktop. This is an environment file. Let's see what it created a new environment file. So it's BD3AA. I can open up Postman now, and I have it open already to the SharePoint Embedded collection. This is published in our sample apps repo at the moment. So you can import the collection. There's instructions within our documentation to do that. In the SharePoint Embedded Postman collection, there's both a delegated and application folder. So you can use both of those types of authentication with SharePoint Embedded Graph APIs. What I'm going to do now, though, is import that Postman collection or Postman environment file that we just exported. So this is the one that we exported from the container type and app that we just created. There we go. I'm going to go over to my environments. You can see here, all I'm going to do is select it so that's my active environment. There's nothing too fancy in here. It's just the app ID that we just created, the tenant that we created it on, and the container type ID, and some secrets and cert private keys and things like that. With that environment imported and selected in Postman, I can actually go into the application folder, show you some of the APIs. Now, next week, I believe I'm going to be doing kind of a deeper dive, and we can explore some of the APIs here. But I'm just going to show you, like, we can go into the list containers, for example, and I can show you that I have no containers. I'm making an app-only call here on the Graph API. So it gives you a little glimpse as to what the APIs look like. You can see that I don't have any containers because I just created this container type and registered it on this tenant. So now I'm going to go back into the Visual Studio Code, and hopefully it looks like it's still running, but I was hoping that my app would be ready to go. We'll see. Maybe it should come up shortly. If not, we can explore some of the APIs a little bit more. All right. I'll open up a new tab, and we'll go to localhost 3000, which I believe is where the app is going to be running. It might not come up quite yet because it looks like it's still trying to get it. It's almost there. While it's doing that, I'm actually going to show you how you can create a container. So I'll give you a even deeper sneak peek, only because it looks like it's slow to pull the libraries down. So what I'm doing here is going to create my first file storage container within this tenant. You can see there's the Graph API. It's currently on beta. Nothing too special about this request, though, other than in the body of the request, I'm going to give it a display name for the container created with app only auth, give it a description, and then you need to provide that container type ID, which is coming from my environment file. So I'll create that container. And again, the way to think about a container is it's almost like a SharePoint document library. So I've got now an empty container. It's a place where I can go put files and documents within it. Hopefully now, oh, looks like it's still taking forever. Live demo. Yeah, I wouldn't call me pro. I can see the chat here. It looks like we're not quite up and running with that application. So I'll try refreshing it again. Not quite. Oh, maybe it's coming up now. Yeah, it's thinking about it. Bear with me for one moment. Yeah, that's. I think these things are expected. Just warnings within NPM starting the app. Hopefully, I don't waste too much of your time. I've got 1 minute left. Once this loads, I can show you the sample app running. Most of the issues most of the delay that you're seeing is because it takes a little while to install all of those NPM modules, or libraries, I should call them, for both the client and the service. Once this comes up, hopefully I can show it to you. It will be a sample application. If not, no big deal. I can show it to you next week. But basically, it's a sample application that allows you to kind of CRUD containers and the contents within them. And so you can go create containers. We should be able to see the container that we just created through Postman. And then you can upload files and manage files and things like that from within there. So if that doesn't start in the next, say, 15 seconds, I'll just move on and not waste your folks' time. And I can show you, I can start next week with a quick demo of the sample app. Okay, but I will depart and move on, and we'll call it there and leave it at that, and we'll talk to you folks next week with some of the deeper dives of the APIs. So we'll explore some of the APIs, how you can get delegated access tokens and create containers, manage container permissions, manage the content within containers, and open up files and things like that. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. It is so close. Come on. But just to be clear on this one, this is a one-time thing. npm installs is only being executed first time when you're running the thing. So that's whenever you're running the thing again, it will not run to npm install. Right, Mark? So,
yep,
excellent.
that's right.
Thanks for confirming that. Quite a few questions in the chat. If you can follow up on some of those, and that would be awesome. But I guess we'll need to figure and show that one next week. But that's all good. Really, really cool. And awesome work on the extension. It really simplifies getting started development. So thank you for that.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Then, Gary, you are next on the line with Copilot Studio, introduction on Copilot Studio and how to get started with that one.
Wonderful. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. And today I want to, well, first of all, my name is Gary Pretty. I'm a principal product manager on the Microsoft Copilot Studio team. You may know Copilot Studio as its former name, which was Power Virtual Agents. But at Microsoft Ignite last year, we announced that we were rebranding to Microsoft Copilot Studio with a broader mandate for the product. So we thought this would be a good time to show up, to talk to you about what is Microsoft Copilot Studio, what are the things it can do, and then I'm going to show you a quick demo of some of the generative AI capabilities that we are landing in the product right now. Some of them are available in public preview as we speak. And I know that over the course of the next few weeks and couple of months, there's going to be some deeper dives as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and share the screen and we'll get started. Okay, so Microsoft Copilot Studio, what is it? Like I said, it's we rebranded Power Virtual Agents into Microsoft Copilot Studio at Ignite late last year. But at its core, it can do two things. You can build what we call custom copilots, or what we would formerly call chatbots. And we've had this capability for a long time, but we're really transforming it now with the advent of GPT and generative AI. And we're going to take a deeper look at that in just a couple of minutes. But now Copilot Studio is there to also allow you to extend first-party Microsoft copilots. So by that, we're talking about Microsoft 365 Copilot. We're talking about some of the copilots that exist inside of the Dynamics 365 arena, like Sales Copilot, etc. And really, these are the sort of two main reasons for Microsoft Copilot Studio to exist and for you to use it. I will stress, I get this question a lot, like, should I be building a custom Copilot and deploying that out to my users, or should I be using Microsoft 365 Copilot? My answer is always, it's not an either or. It just depends what context your users are currently working within. You can absolutely do both. So let's take a quick look. I've not got many slides. We are going, let me just see if I can get PowerPoint to play ball. Here we go. Right, so I've not got many slides, but I really wanted to just call out sort of where does Copilot Studio sit? And so like I said, really we're spanning the spectrum from building your own custom copilots on the right-hand side of this diagram, right through to Copilot for Microsoft 365 on the left-hand side. And then there's a number of Dynamics copilots. So it's really sitting at that foundation level underneath all of those. But you'll see underneath Copilot Studio, we have lots of services that you will recognize: Azure AI Studio, the bot framework, Power Platform connectors, both custom and pre-built connectors. And all of these things are really, make the foundation of your Copilot and really allow you to enhance its capabilities, as you'll see in just a few minutes as well. I do want to call out specifically for custom copilots. So obviously, if you're extending Microsoft 365 Copilot, you know where that's available. But for custom copilots, this really is a multi-channel platform. I can build a custom Copilot today within Copilot Studio, and I can deploy it to any one of these channels. So if I'm building a HR Copilot, for example, I can build that in Copilot Studio and have that deployed to Microsoft Teams in just a few minutes and available to my employees, whether that's everybody, whether it's specific teams. That really is up to you, and it's very easy to configure. I can deploy it to my own custom website, maybe in my mobile app as well. And then there's a whole additional set of capabilities which I can do if I'm using Dynamics for customer service and I want to make my Copilot available, via something like WeChat, WhatsApp, etc. So it really is very, very flexible. So with that said, that's all the slides that I've got for today. So let's now switch over and actually look at some demo. So when I first land into Copilot Studio, which is where I am right now, I can create a custom Copilot, which is what you can see in front of you. So when I'm creating a custom Copilot, I can actually make this useful now in just seconds. Previously I would need to build out what we call topics. Topics are essentially manually authored pieces of conversation, and I would author these. And it's actually, we have a state-of-the-art authoring canvas, which I'll show you in just a few minutes, which it makes building these things incredibly simple. But now I can actually get started simply by pointing my Copilot to a data source. So in this particular case, I've pointed it to Microsoft.com. And now that I've pointed it to Microsoft.com, we're actually using the power of generative AI to make your Copilot useful instantly. So I can now ask questions like, how do I restart my Xbox? And what's actually going to happen is we're using Bing search to actually search across Microsoft.com. And then we're using generative AI to actually summarize an answer for your end users. And you can see that that answer is completely contextual to the question that I asked. It's able to provide citations as to where it found the answer for me as well. And I can even ask follow-up questions. So I can say things like, it won't switch on. What should I do? I don't have to say my Xbox won't switch on. It knows what I'm talking about based on the previous conversation that I've had. And it's going to give me a contextual answer. And you can see here that it's actually pulled information from multiple different places on the website. So this is, a step beyond search and what's available. And really, genuinely all I did here was type in Microsoft.com, click OK, and I'm ready to test, which is just incredibly powerful. And this is a GA capability today. Probably more interesting for those of you on this call, though, is we don't just have one type of data source for this capability, which we call generative answers, but we have multiple types. So this is great using Bing search for public websites if I'm maybe dealing with my external customers. But what happens if I'm dealing with my internal, employees, for example? Well, I can actually also point this to a SharePoint site. I can enable authentication on my Copilot. Have my users log in or use single sign-on if I'm inside of Teams. And then when I ask questions, I can actually have the answers use a SharePoint site and the content within it to surface answers up for me. And if I need even more control, I can use Azure OpenAI Studio to actually control the ingestion of my data and then just give me that extra level of control there as well. And this is something that we're working on improving over, we're iterating on this all the time, but this really has been one of the most transformative things that we've released for sort of bot or now Copilot building in a long time. Okay, so that's generative answers. I realize I'm going quick, but we've obviously not got too long. What happens though when I want to actually take action on behalf of a user? Well, I said to you before, we have this awesome state-of-the-art authoring canvas, which allows me to ask questions, send messages. I now can even make HTTP requests directly from the canvas. I can use PowerFX to manipulate my data, and actually building something out that's relatively sophisticated is very, very simple. But again, now we're using generative AI to really take a next sort of leap forward. So I'm going to jump into my generative AI page, and I'm going to turn off generative answers for a second. And I'm going to turn on one of our new public preview features that's only been in preview for a few weeks. And this is called generative actions. And this is the ability for me to, instead of having to author manual topics, I can now just add actions to my Copilot and then have the conversation generated for me automatically. So if we see here, I've got two what we call plugin actions that I've added. And adding plugin actions is really, really straightforward. I can simply come and search for them. And plugin actions can be based on a Power Automate flow. They can be based on a pre-built connector action or a custom connector action. So as long as you have one of those things, you can add plugin actions to your Copilot. And if we take a look here, we've got two, and they're both based on custom connectors. And these custom connectors are calling real Azure functions that I've created and deployed to Azure, and they are returning essentially just JSON data. What you can see though is each plugin action, as we call them, has one or more inputs. So in the case of the create a vacation request, it has a inputs for the start date and the end date and the employee ID. I've set the employee ID because I'm mocking an authenticated scenario, but had I configured authentication, it would just grab that for me. And then it also has one or more outputs as well. So you can see here that I have a status object that's coming back from that API. And every plugin also has a description. And what happens now is instead of using a traditional natural language model to respond to the user's request, we're actually using a GPT-based LLM to orchestrate over these plugins. So again, I've not authored anything specific to handle anything around leave or vacation, but now I can just simply start to do things like this. So I can say, what is my total leave allowance? And I can open up what we call our new generative tracing window. And you can see here that what it's actually done is it's now selected the correct plugin, it's executed that API, and it's given me a contextual answer based on my question. I didn't author any of this. All of this is entirely generated. So I can ask a related question, which is how much holiday do I have left? And what it's going to do is it's going to call exactly the same plugin, but now it's going to give me a different answer because I asked a different question, which is, pretty amazing. Again, previously I would have had to have authored at least 2 topics to do this. I can even say, has my vacation for February been approved yet? So again, it's going to call exactly the same plugin, and it's going to give me a different answer. So here I'm able to see how I can use plugin actions to ask questions over my own. I'm not taking my Surface with me. Over my own. I'm not sure if someone's talking. Okay. So you can see here that I'm able to actually ask questions over my own APIs, which is pretty incredible. However, had I added a plugin action based on a ServiceNow connector or a SharePoint connector or something like that, I could do exactly the same thing with those pre-built connector actions as well. But what happens if I actually want to take action on behalf of a user? So that's where my second custom connector comes in, which is the ability to create a vacation request. So now I can do things like create a new holiday request. And what you're going to see now is not only does it find the right plugin, but based on the inputs, it also identifies what information is missing and generates all the conversation needed to gather that from the user and execute that API. Now, previously, this would need me to author a question node, another question node, then call an API, then transform the data, and then do something with that. But here, I can simply be like, okay, we should do March 12th, 2024. And then it's going to say, okay, what's the end date? We do have a bug where these aren't being populated, but trust me, they are being populated. So then I can say March 14th, 2024. And now you can see here that it's actually extracted those dates for me. I've actually used PowerFX to provide a confirmation message, which is good practice if I'm going to actually take action on behalf of a user. But now, what if I want to actually, I've made a mistake? Well, now I can do things like end date should be March 16th, 2024. And what it's going to do there, it's going to replay that back to me. You can see that it's updated the value. And not only can I correct myself at confirmation, I could have asked all of this in one shot. I could have said, create me a new vacation request from March 12th through the 16th. I could have answered the first question. And when it asked me for the second one, I could have said, actually, you know what? Make it start on March 13th and let's go to March 16th. Because we're using GPT to analyze everything that the user is saying and do our slot filling and entity extraction, the conversation becomes incredibly natural now for the end user. So when I'm finished, I can just say, yes, it's
Oh no, is he locked up?
Oh,
Probably
I think we
around.
lost. Oh, there we
he's
go.
back.
Oh,
He's
Gary,
back.
there was a
Okay.
hiccup.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, right. Okay. No problem. Thanks. This is in public preview right now. We're working hard to get to GA. We're adding a ton of capabilities, but hopefully this gives you an idea of just how straightforward it is now to get started building an incredibly powerful generative AI-driven custom Copilot. The last thing I will leave you with in the last 30 seconds is something we can dive into on a future call, which is the other side of Copilot Studio. And this is the idea of building plugins, which you can then enable over in Microsoft 365 Copilot. Those plugins are going to be similar to what you've just seen, those types of plugin actions. There are some nuances between the two, but it's actually pretty straightforward to get started, providing you've got all the right sort of licenses in place. But that's a whole other call that we can dive into. So hopefully that's been useful. I'll check the chat for any questions, and thank you so much for your time, folks.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. Really cool stuff. Really, 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 really awesome to see how this evolves forward and awesome capabilities within a product. Now, from a timing perspective, we're a bit delayed. It's all good. We might go a few minutes long today. Hopefully, we'll see how that goes. But Ayça, your turn.
Thanks, Vesa. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Don't see anything yet on the screen.
Okay. Now
Too many exciting demos. And awesome demo coming up from you as well. So I can see the screen. Ayça, take it away.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining last session of the day. Today, we're going to ingest GitHub repositories into Copilot for Microsoft 365 using graph connectors. And we will build the graph connector in Python. My name is Ayça Bas. I'm a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft, and I'm so excited to be here. Let's get started. So before I jump in the demo, I just want to highlight that this is part of a series we are running with our team. And if you want to dive into Copilot for Microsoft 365 extensibility, if you've never heard of it before, our series is actually available on YouTube. You can go ahead and check out Waldeck's and Gary's sessions earlier in the community call, and you can learn more about what is plugins, what is graph connectors. And today I will show you one sample about graph connectors, and we will have more samples coming in the community calls in the next week, so check them out as well. Okay, so in today's session, we will focus on Copilot for Microsoft 365 extensibility, specifically graph connectors, and we will build it in Python. We will inject external data being GitHub connectors. And I think it's better if I just jump in the demo and get hands-on. It's much better for us, I guess. Oop, not the resources. Okay, so let me quickly walk you through what I have in place. It's a very simple sample. I just have a config file. In the config file, I have client ID, tenant ID, and graph user scopes. I created Entra app before, and you just need to go ahead and create Entra app. You need the client ID. If you choose the account type as all organizations, then you can keep it as common. Otherwise, you can provide tenant ID. And I put all of the graph user scopes because I don't want to go back and forth. We will need external connection and also external item scopes for this demo. And let's jump into main file. Okay, so what do we have here? We have settings first and foremost from the config file, and by using the settings, we're actually creating our graph, meaning we are actually creating graph client, and then the first thing we do is we're calling graph.getUser. Let's check out what we have in the graph.py, and here we are initiating we're first of all, of course, handling the authentication, and here we're using device code credential. This is only for the demo purpose. We don't actually recommend that a lot for the production level projects, but for the demo sake, we are actually going to use the device code credential. And finally, we are calling get user, and we're getting display name, email, and user principal name of the user. And to do that, we just need to return self.userClient, me, get, and we're getting the user information we want. Before I run the project, I just want to highlight that today we're going to focus on 3 main areas. The first one is creating the connection for graph connectors. The second one is creating schema. And the third one is creating items in our existing connection. Okay, so let's start with the create connection section. And actually, wait, before I jump into it, I just want to run our project and show you how the authentication works and how we get the user information. Okay, so I'm running Python 3 main.py. This will actually bring me a link for logging in, and then I have a code here. Let's just copy this because we need to use for the login, and I'll paste it here. And once I'm done with the authentication, then I can start with my options and I'll walk you through all of them. Okay, so the first thing I should see here is obviously get user, because let's go back and check what we have in the main. After getting the graph client, we are actually calling graph.getUser, and there we go. We are already retrieving Ayça Bas, and that means that we can move further. Okay, before we choose any of these options, I just want to show you the code step by step so we understand together. First thing I will do is creating a new external connection. When I extend this, there are 3 main important things to create a connection. The first thing is ID, the second name, and third description. You can either provide this information in the external connection, or you can ask input for the user. So user can provide the input and you can create the external connection. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm actually asking user to provide me an input. And finally, when I create the external connection, I'm just going to call the graph client and external connection post, and we will post the new connection in the body. So let's try to do that and see. And actually, how I'm calling this function in the first place is in the main. And let me extend the first elif. Here, I'm actually choosing 1, and it is going to call graph.createConnection, and it is our function. Okay, let's select 1, and I will say connector demo, and you can actually provide better ID, name, and you can provide different description and name here, but just for the sake of time, I'm just putting something short, connector demo for Python, and name and ID can be different. Just for demo sake, I just kept them same. And our connection is getting created. How do we know that our connection is getting created, or if it is created at all? Here it says successfully. Let's go ahead and check in the admin portal. So this is the admin.microsoft.com, and this is the place we actually manage all of our connections. Here in the menu, you can go to settings, search and intelligence. In the data source here, you should be able to see all of your data connections, meaning all of your connectors. Now we just created a new connector called demo connector, and you're supposed to see that in this list. I think it's going to load in one point, and then we can see if it exists at all. Yes. Okay, connector demo. It is created already. Let's go back. Second step for us is, actually, I'll go through the menu first. The second step for us is creating a new schema. And here, the second choice for me is creating the schema. Let's go to the schema. And before that, I, of course, need the connection ID. And don't forget the connection ID you defined here. This is what we need. We will provide our connection ID so that we will assign the schema in our connection. Let's go to the schema function and extend this. This is the place where we define what kind of properties we want inside our connection. And here we define the properties we want, such as name, description, and HTML. And inside the properties, settings are very critical. For example, you need to define is searchable true, is retrievable true, so Copilot can actually understand that these properties are searchable. You also have to define labels, meaning that label title is actually on our name, and this is helping for semantic indexing to understand that the label title is the name property. And same for example, URL, label URL is actually HTML URL. This makes Copilot to understand our data, and this is what we're defining in the schema in the first place before actually sending our data in the extension, in the connector. So once we define our properties, and the only thing I'm getting from GitHub is actually name, description, and HTML URL. And after that, I'm calling the client. And then in the external connections, I'm creating the schema inside my existing connection I just created, and I'm calling schema.patch. And I'm sending out the schema I just defined right here. So let's try to do that. I will select 2. And here I need to define my connector ID, which is connector demo. And this is going to create schema. As you remember, currently my connector is in draft. The moment I actually sent out the schema, which is now it already happened, it is going to be in the publishing version, meaning that when I refresh admin panel, I can actually see the state changes right away. It is not draft anymore. It will be, yes, publishing. Publishing can take about 3 to 5 minutes, but I don't want to keep you waiting because I already have 3 minutes left. I'm going to actually send all of my data into a community demo that I created before. This is the connection I created earlier today. And I sent the schema, but I didn't send any data there yet. And this is going to be in the same format in 3 to 5 minutes. So let's use this one instead, and we can send our data right away. How are we going to send our data? First of all, we need GitHub repositories. So I have a function for that here. I'm using api.github.com, and I am just providing the username. And in this demo, we are gonna get GitHub repositories from PNP actually, and then we will ingest some data from PNP to Copilot. And after getting the data, and I need to provide username as PNP, the next step for me, let's just extend. We will provide connection ID, username, and then we will call get the repos. And after that, we will create items, meaning we will create the data and actually we will send our data in the connector. So here for each repository, I'm calling this and creating external item. And in the external item, ID is my repository name, and then ACL is defined as everyone, and our properties, we're only getting 3, name, description, HTML URL, and we are just calling the item, we are putting the item in our connector, and we are calling this for every single repositories available. I'm not using any GitHub token, so we will just get a couple of the repositories from the PNP, and let's call 3, and we can send our data. But let's check community demo. Okay, community demo, connection ID, username is PNP, and then we have a list of repositories from PNP, and we are creating items one by one. So we will just get 10 to 15 repositories. It's getting created. Let's go to the admin portal and create the result type while we're sending the data over. We can just say here that community demo repos. You can give any name here, and we can choose content source. And for us, content source is already created. It's loading in the list. So the reason why we're defining the result type is we want to see the data coming through in a proper shape for such as adaptive cards. And once we search it on any search or on Copilot, we want to see that adaptive card coming as a result. You can define this using code, or you can just define this in the admin panel. And I don't know why this is taking a lot. Okay. Community demo, I will choose as a data. Okay, so we have a designer here, and you can see what kind of properties you can use. We have description, HTML, name. I will launch this and then choose result with URL and description. And here I will provide, name. Sorry, it's too small. HTML URL and description. This is going to create me a JSON file, and then I'll go back, paste the JSON here, next, add result type, and this is just supposed to add the result type inside my connector. And meanwhile, I think my data ingestion is done. Yes, these are the data we actually got from PNP so far. It's a small data, but it's fine. And I already tried this with another connector, to be honest, because I know it would be a really short amount of time and I wanted to show this to you anyways. Last step is including connector results in our vertical, and I will add this in our vertical, meaning that our data will be ingested in our search and all of the other experiences. If you want to see your results option, your connection name in the vertical specifically, you can go to customizations and add this in your vertical. Make sure that you put a good name and it will appear in the search. Let's quickly go to office.com first and search our result. For example, I will search graph connector. It's easier for me. And I'm supposed to see a adaptive card we picked with a name, URL of the repo, and then description. And there we go. We already have the data, and I will click to it, and it's a proper repository from PNP. And the same thing is supposed to happen for Copilot. Let me see. Wait, I'm just getting... Not this one. I'm just trying to move this hover over situation, but okay, the final step, apologies. Okay, found it here. Somehow I couldn't click it. Okay, finally, I'll just type to Copilot. Just a second. Okay. Are there any graph connector samples? And here my results should show up right away because my data is already a part of the vertical, it's already a part of search and index, so I should be able to receive the proper GitHub repository related to it. Okay, something is one reference. Okay, yeah, there we go. Finally, sometimes it works, sometimes in the demos it doesn't work. Today is the lucky day, I guess. Okay, there we have it. This is what I wanted to share today. I have a couple of resources. We have a new Learn module for connectors. You can go through the Learn module and create a connector from scratch and make it work for Copilot for Microsoft 365. We have a lot of samples you can check and have a look, not only in Python, but in many languages. And also, if you have any questions regarding Copilot extensibility, plugins, or connectors, feel free to reach out. I think that's it. Vesa, over
Excellent.
to you.
Thank you, Ayça. Awesome demo. Awesome demo. I know that these are really tough when we have 3 awesome demos and full of great content, and we can easily run out of time. And the last position, Ayça, sorry for you for that one this week. So all good. We got it covered. we get it published in YouTube next week as an individual demo, and the recording tomorrow as well for those who missed maybe the last pieces. But awesome story. Thank you for that one. And by the way, that Microsoft Graph Learning module is looking awesome, and getting a lot of great feedback from the community as well. So great work on that. Now, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Ayça. I'm going to quickly run through the final slides and we'll close up for today. Next week, we'll have Bob German talking about extending Copilot Microsoft 365 Northwind inventory sample. That is about the plugins. So we're heading back from the Graph connectors to the plugin. We'll have Marc Windle coming back talking about SharePoint Embedded. And then Paolo, who's not really a Microsoft employee, but he has a VDAS account, so we're doing a bit of an exception, starts explaining on how to enable Microsoft Copilot Studio in your tenant for SharePoint content. So we're really walking through step by step on how can you build, for example, HR Copilot, product data Copilots, and so on, based on the information what you have within your SharePoint or OneDrive installations using the Copilot Studio. So looking forward on that series as well. A lot of awesome stuff there. Now, if you're interested on between the calls, chatting with everybody else in the community, please join our Discord server. We have more than 1,500 members already in there. I think it's closing in the 1,600. It is growing really fast, which is awesome to see. And people are asking questions and helping each other within the community over there. We are always looking for feedback around this course as well. So please, if you have time, please give us feedback. We understand what do you think and what is the course useful. This information is also really valuable for us as we keep on justifying doing this course within the future with you in the community. So please, if you have a few minutes, fill in the form. It's not a long form, helps us on keeping these calls live. Not that we're planning to shut them down, but again, still positive feedback always welcome, and constructive feedback as well. Now, recording will be available in 24 hours at Microsoft 365 and Power Platform Community YouTube channel. Typically, it's less than that. Typically, it might be 14 hours or so, and it will be available. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn. You'll know when the course recordings are being available, or when you subscribe to the video channel, you'll know immediately. Next call is 8 a.m. Pacific time next Thursday. Looking forward on seeing you there. But thanks everybody for joining. Awesome call, a bit longer today than expected, but it's okay. These things can happen. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for the lovely and interactive discussion in the chat. Let's stay in touch throughout the weeks. Bye-bye.